for a few people to come on and hopefully join me. And tonight we're going to be making some really fun little hair scrunchies. If you come on and join me live, say hello, give me a little wave. And if you come on and watch on replay, let me know that you're watching on replay. I just want to note you might hear some giggling and young people jumping around on the trampoline because we've got birthday party celebrations tonight. So yes, you might hear little girls giggling in the background. You might even see them come in. Who knows? We'll see. This is such an easy little make. It's a really, really super one. And great if you've got young children or grandchildren. You know, super little easy make you can make for them. And you can sneak in some sewing time without getting told off by the young ones because you're making it for them or even with them necessarily, you know, maybe. So if you've got any young ones watching as well, let me know as well. Give me some waves. And we will get going in a minute. So let me tell you guys what you're going to need to make your scrunchie first of all. So with like a lot of my makes, a lot of the things I do are using your scraps, and this is exactly one of those things. So you need to grab yourself a scrap of fabric of some sort. So I'm going to make a scrunchie out of this gorgeous flamingo fabric tonight, and I'm also, if I've got time, I'm sure I will have, because these are dead easy to make, going to try and make it out of this gorgeous plissé fabric, which I have been making some children's skirts out of. This was a recommendation by the lovely Carrie from So Pretty Kitty, who I've been hanging out with lots. She has been making these gorgeous elasticated skirts out of this fabric, and it's lush. So I've been making some for my daughter and my daughter's friends. So I'm going to try and make a scrunchie out of this as well, because I think that would be really cool. So we're going to have a go at that as well. So you need some fabrics. You need enough fabric that is going to be 18 inches long. So a piece of fabric 18 inches long by 4 inches wide, so deep. That's how long scrap of fabric you need to have. So just bear that in mind when you're looking for your fabrics. You need some elastic as well. I'd probably go for a thin elastic like this one. This one's 1/4 of an inch, I want to say, or yeah, 1/4 of an inch wide, because you obviously don't want too much when it's in your hair. You're going to need some thread in your machine, and you're going to need a hand sewing needle as well, because we're going to do a little bit of hand sewing on this. And you're also going to need something to pull your scrunchie through the right way, because we make a tube and then we turn it in the right way. So you might need something like a safety pin, for instance, to help you do that also. Make one. So let's get chopping. I'm going to move my sewing machine aside. I'm going to start with my flamingos. So I hope everyone is having a lovely week so far. And I think the weather is on the turn. I think it's going to be a gorgeous weekend, apparently so. So let's hope that is the case. I'm just going to get my ruler and a pencil a moment. In fact, one thing I've forgotten, because I haven't made a pattern for this, I'm literally just going to draw it onto the reverse of my fabric and cut it out, because it's quite a simple design. If it goes a bit wonky, it's not going to overly matter once we've made it. So I want to work in inches to do this, because that's what I've done for my measurements. Let me just cut off that wonky corner. So let me know in the comments, have you made a scrunchie before? Who's had a go? And how did you find it? Sometimes they can be a bit tricky, so I'm hoping this way I'm going to show you tonight, you know, will be quite easy for you to follow along. So I've got a nice straight edge already on this lovely fabric. So it's nice and straight down the bottom. So I'm just measuring up from that bottom edge 4 inches. And I want to try and get that 4 inches long enough to do then 18 inches going all the way along. I've got little girls watching me from the window. So I'm now along those little dots marks I've made. I'm now doing 18 inches. And then I'm going to roughly draw that in with my ruler to get the size. So I'm just using a normal pencil on the reverse of my fabric here. And I'm not being overly accurate, to be fair. Just getting a rough idea. So you could do one. You could make a pattern, of course you could, because then you've got it ready for the next one you might want to do. Hello, Emma. Thank you for joining, lovely. So I've literally drawn, you can just about see my drawing line there all the way along. That's 18 inches to here, and then I've gone down, that's 4 inches in depth there. So I'm just going to cut that out now, and I'm going to cut out my other piece as well, using this as a pattern piece. all the way along. So there we go. I've got now one long strip. So that's 4 inches deep and 18 inches in length. And that's all you need fabric-wise. That's what you need to make your scrunchie. So I'm going to just cut that out again from this other fabric. So I'm going to use the flamingo fabric as my template. So I'm just going to pop that on top of here. Now this plissé fabric is like stretchy because it's folded. It's pleated fabric basically. So the pleats sort of expand a little bit. So I'm going to try and get them to stay in. So it keeps its pleats slightly, and then I'm just going to chop it. And again, I'm not sort of doing it precisely. I'm not too worried. I'm just giving it a rough chop. So now I've got 2 pieces. Sorry, I've got little girls at the window just to my right here. They're spying on me. So I've got 2 pieces of fabric. So next job to do now is you just want to get this ready to sew. So plain and simple, you want to grab your fabric, right side facing you, and fold that in half. So right side's facing in half. You can, I probably wouldn't iron it because you don't really want an ironed line going across your scrunchie. So you just want to get that in half, pop some pins to hold it in place or clips or whatever you want to do. If you need to. I'm just going to put a few in there just to hold it in half. So my right sides are facing in the middle there, and my now 4 inches is turned to 2 inches because I folded it in half. So that nice long edge now down the edge here is where I'm going to sew. This raw edge, the other edge is folded. And what I want to do when I'm sewing this is leave a gap. So on either end, it doesn't matter which end at this point, you want to leave a gap. So you want to sew in, then leave about a 1.5 inch gap and then continue sewing to the end. So my gap, for instance, will be here. So what I will do is I'll start sewing at this end. I'll sew all the way along to this mark here. Then I will stop, leave this gap open here, start again at this point, and then go all the way along to the other open end. I'm not going to sew up the 2 ends, and I just want to leave that gap in there. So that's going to be my first job, so I'm going to do that now. So as always on here, all I'm doing when I'm sewing this is following the edge of my sewing machine foot. So the raw edge that I'm sewing down is just sat against the edge of my sewing machine foot, and that gives me a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So then I'm not going in too far. It's just really easy to follow. So that's what I'm following. And you want to do a back stitch when you begin and a back stitch when you finish. Take your pins out as you go. So I'm sewing down to that first mark I've made. So it's worth making that little reminder mark because it's so easy to forget to leave the gaps and then just sew right to the end. So I've sewn down to that first mark. I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to start again here. So then I've got that little hole in the middle. And again, I want to do the little back stitch, start and finish always so my stitching doesn't unravel. Leaving that same seam allowance. So elastic wise, I've got this white elastic just in my stash from years ago. But you know, you can use any elastic you've got. You don't want it too thick really, so the thinner elastic is better, but you can have a different colour, for instance, you know, that doesn't matter as long as you can't see it through your scrunchie. So anything you've got to hand, and it doesn't have to be brand new. If you've got something old that the elastic's come out of, you can use that, for instance. You know, sort of have a hunt and see what you've got laying about. So I've now sewn all the way along, all the way along, all the way along, all the way along. I've got to my mark, stopped, I've got a gap here. So where I drew my 2 little marked lines, I've now got a gap, an opening, and then I've sewn down to the bottom, and both of my ends are still open, okay? So I've got a tube now. So now I'm going to turn that tube halfway in the right way. So you want to turn in the side where you haven't got the gap. So this end here, I've sewn all the way down. So this is the end I want to poke in. I want to leave on the outside the part that's got the gap. So I will show you. My gap is here. This end is where I want to poke it through. So you can either do this by hand, or you can get a safety pin, or if you've got a turning in tool or turning out tool, you can use that as well. I'm just going to use a safety pin. I'm just going to literally pin that to the end of my fabric, and then I'm going to poke that into my fabric and feed that safety pin down. Pulling my fabric up as I go until it reaches the bottom here. So you keep going. So it's still in the wrong way at this point. So I'm poking it through. I'm going past that gap now, but I don't want the safety pin to come out there. I want it to come out this other end, but then I don't want to put it right the way through. So I basically want to meet up these two raw edges. So if you pull the safety pin out and undo it and get that raw edge we've just pulled through, keep it level with the other raw edge at the top here, and then pull the rest out so it's nice and flat. So you should then have half the tube, okay, like this. So I've now got half of that length. I've got the inside tube here, look, coming up through, but it's not pulled all the way through. So then basically what we're going to do, you want to keep the two side seams in the same place. So the side seam inside here, which is now the right way out, and the side seam on this outside piece, which is still the wrong way out, they want to be level. You don't want one round here because that means it's twisted. So make sure they're still lined up, and make sure the two raw edges now of those two pieces are lined up around the top. And then we're going to stitch around that piece to seal that up, and that will then give us a big round tube when we've done that. So just lining those up. You could put a clip on there if you need to, but I'm not going to worry. So you basically, in there now, I've got those two raw edges lined up. So that's the raw edge for what we pulled up through the tube, and obviously the outer tube as well, okay? So you can just about sort of see them there. Look, one's just poking above, but I'm going to sew them lined up. And now what I'm going to do by hand, because I'm not going to be able to get this under the sewing machine, if you're sewing with jersey fabric, you may be able to stretch that and get that under your sewing machine to sew around that little opening, but this is too small. So I'm just going to now sew all the way around this top ring to close that up. I'm just going to do an overstitch to do that, fairly tight together so it's nice and strong, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Fabulous. So let me get a hand sewing needle. So yes, unfortunately this does have a bit of hand sewing, which we don't all like, but some things just have to. So grab yourself a needle, get rid of that grey, get yourself some cotton that's not going to show too much because you might see a little bit of this peeking through. Now when I do hand sewing, I always double up my thread. One, to stop the thread keep coming out the needle when I'm sewing, and two, just to make it extra strong really. So I always thread my needle, pull the thread right down to the other end so it's double, and then tie a knot in both the threads at that end, at that open end. Because there's nothing worse than when you're sewing and you pull the needle and the thread keeps coming out, and it just makes it stronger with double thread. So I always do that. Just going to tie a few little knots in the end. Okay, so I've just knotted the end there. I've got double thread, and then I'm just going to sew all the way around. So it doesn't matter which, if you start outside or inside, you're not going to see the knot because it's going to be inside one of those tubes. Just going to tuck that down a bit more. And then I'm just literally sewing over to catch the two fabrics and to seal up that opening. Okay, so I'm just literally going in from the outside into the middle and over. I'm going to go all the way around doing that. So just an over stitch all the way around. So to finish off, I normally will put my needle through. I haven't left myself much thread here again. I've got a long needle. And then I'll put my needle back through that loop in the thread to tie a knot on itself. But I haven't left myself very much thread at all. So what I'm going to do is, the other thing you could do is just cut it off and leave some of the thread longer, and then just hand tie a knot. Separate that thread because we've done a double thread when we've put it through our needle, and you could just tie a knot in there either way. See how much thread you've got left. Go. 1. All the concentration now. 2. There you are. I'm just going to trim that off. So I've now sewn all the way around the top there. So that has all been stitched together. So these 2 pieces of fabric now are together. They're hopefully not going to come apart all the way around the top. And then I've got my opening here. So this is why I needed this bit to still stay on the outside, because now I want to pull it through and turn it in the right way. So this little opening here, I'm now going to pull my fabric through there and turn my loop in the right way. Ta-da! So now I've got a loop of fabric that is joined in the middle there where I've sewn it. So there's my join where I've hand sewn here. Okay. And I've still got my little gap. Where's my little gap gone? Where I'm going to thread my elastic through. Here it is here. So that's a little gap I left when I sewed all the way down the open edge first. So we've now got a nice loop here. So this could also be a way where you make one of those headbands that go over. So if you had jersey fabric, that would then make you a nice little headband that goes all the way over your head. So now you want to get your piece of elastic and you want to cut your elastic. So the length of our tube was 18 inches. So I'm going to cut my elastic 8 inches because I want it to obviously have lots of gather in there, but I want it long enough that I can tie it over my hair a couple of times. So I'm going to do 8.5 because I want to join it. So I'm just going to cut this 8.5 inches. I'm not going to stretch the elastic as I cut it. So if you stretch your elastic, it's going to obviously turn out longer. So I've just cut that 8.5 inches long, roughly. I've got a little bit of a horrible end there to chop that off. And then I'm going to thread this through my now scrunchie. So you want to get that open edge that you've left when you've been sewing. And I'm going to put my safety pin now onto my elastic, like so. So just threading that through the end of my elastic. Or you could use a bodkin, or if you've got something like that. And I'm going to thread this all the way through my scrunchie. Now you don't want to lose this end. We need to keep hold of this end because otherwise it's going to just disappear into this loop. So hold on to this end with one hand, with your little finger, and then pass the elastic through with your safety pin until it comes back out, that gap. Where is the gap there? And then you can join it together. Okay, so there it is. There's the other end. That's the end I want. I'm going to take my safety pin off. And now I want to attach these 2 bits of elastic together. So you kind of want to make sure your elastic doesn't get too twisted in there as well. So if you hold on the 2 ends, just have sort of a feel through and make sure it feels fairly flat. This thin elastic's not going to overly matter, to be fair. It's in your hair. It's not like you're wearing it on your body and you're going to feel it anyway. So I'm going to put these 2 ends together now, flat like this. And then I'm just going to do some little zigzag stitches there to hold it. Hold that elastic together. So move your scrunchie out of the way. That's the opening we've still got there. I've passed it through. And I'm just going to do a little zigzag stitch to hold that in place. So this is probably the fiddliest bit because you've got to try and hold this and get it in your machine without it moving too much. So this is the bit that takes the practice more than anything. So what you want to do is kind of get it under your machine. In fact, it's a little tip for this that works a bit better, is if you lay it flat on top of each other, like so, and then put a pin catching both pieces of elastic, like that, a nice long pin. and then pop it under the machine so that holds it in place, and then lower your needle without touching the pin, and then remove the pin before you start sewing. So I've just lowered my needle, take my pin out because it's now caught it in the needle, and then I can sew down. Okay, I'm not using my regular machine, so I'm not sure how this zigzag is going to turn out, but we'll give it a go. And I'm still going to do the little back stitch now, just trying to keep this straight. And I'm going to go backwards with the zigzag as well, so all the way back. Over it. So I've just zigzagged forward and zigzagged back to secure that elastic together. Okay, so once you've done that and you're happy, if you're not, just put it back under and go again. If it moves around, just do it a couple of times. You can just nip that back under again. Once you've done a stitch, you could even do a couple of little hand stitches to hold it in place. It's then easier to stick back under and go again. So just make sure that you're happy it's secure, because once it's in your scrunchie and you're using it, the last thing you want is that elastic to come away, because then it's inside of your scrunchie and you're going to have to take it apart. So just make sure that's working okay and you're happy with that. So go back over it again if you need to. Make sure it's secure. So now you will have your scrunchie shape. Ta-da! And then all you have to do is close up that opening. So best way to do that is with the hand sewing again. You could put that under the machine, but you're obviously going to see the stitch line. So the best way to do this is to do a slip stitch so you can't see it by hand. And a slip stitch, a ladder stitch, some people call it. I did a little video on this. I think it might be on my YouTube channel showing you how to do it. That would be the suggested way, because it's like an invisible stitch. So you do a stitch one side, come across, do a stitch, come across, do a stitch, either side of the fabric. And then as you pull it at the end, it closes that opening up nice and neat so you can't see it. I should do this the way you've just told me, Karen. So that's what I'm going to do now a moment, just to close up that gap. And then I might put it in my hair and see if it works. Fingers crossed. So, done my knot, and then you just want to slip stitch this piece up. So what you could do is get it nice and flat, that opening nice and flat, pop your pin in just to hold it flat, and then you can do your slip stitch. So your slip stitch, you want to start on the inside of your fabric. Just tuck it in. So you want to start down the inside of your fabric so you can't see your knot. And you basically want to do a stitch one side. So you put your needle in one side and come out one side. So you're doing a stitch on one side of the fabric. And then you pass across parallel to where that thread's come out, and then you do a stitch to the other side. Then you come back parallel again and you take a stitch to the other side. So you just keep repeating on each side, trying to get slightly in the fabric, so you don't want to be coming on the outside of the fabric. And you don't want your stitches to be too big because this is a small project. And just keep going along. Keep going along. So if you opened your fabric up slightly, you'd see the ladder effect from your stitching as it goes from side to side. Hence it's called a ladder stitch. And hence it's called an invisible stitch. Another term for it is because when you put it nice and tight at the end, you can't see or shouldn't see much of your stitches on the opening. So I'm just working along. So this is quite a nice little sit down in front of the telly job, the hand stitching bit. So you could make up some scrunchies. These are great little projects as well for school fetes and things. They're very current at the moment. So you can make up lots of scrunchies for upcoming summer fairs maybe at schools or whatever groups and things that you might be part of. Really nice and cheap to make because you're just using scraps and things. So yeah, and they should be a winner. So I'm almost coming up to this end now of my slip stitch. And as always, I'm sure yours will be much more beautifully sewn than mine because I obviously squeeze it into my time limit. There we go, coming up. There we go. So as I come to the end, I'm just going to pull my stitches, so pull my thread, pull it back on itself, and that is close to that opening up and you can't see my stitches in there. So it just looks like a normal seam line. And then at the end here, I am just going to do a couple of little over stitches just to finish that end off, make it secure. And then as I do my last one, I'm going to put my needle through and poke my needle back through the loop that the thread makes just to tie a knot. Tie it nice and tight and trim that off. There you go. My opening has closed. You can't see that stitch line pretty much at all down there, so that is really good. I'm really pleased with that. And there you have your scrunchie. So you can do your elastic any size you want to. If you want your scrunchie to be a super deep one, you could just make it wider. So you could do a wider one than 4 inches. So maybe make 6 inches, for instance, and that would make the scrunchie much wider here. Yeah, job's done. So it doesn't really hold your hair. Well, it might hold my hair, but it's for putting on after you've got your normal. Let me turn around to show you what it looks like. Ta-da! One scrunchie finished. Can you see? Am I still in camera? There you go, one scrunchie finished. Or if you want to wear it like the new trend, you would just keep it on your wrist and it's like a bracelet. So there we go. Let me, while you're on camera, make my other one quickly to show you as well. See if this will work. So this fabric's a bit trickier to sew. It's a bit slippery, but we'll give it a go. So I might use my clips for this because the pins do not go through it very well at all. Ooh, that would look lovely as a headband. Let's try this on. How embarrassing. Oh yes, look, that's a groovy headband, isn't it? If you're going to the roller disco or something. First time. Perfect. Ta-da! Hurrah! There we go. That one is looking pretty gorgeous, I must admit. I'm not going to make you sit through my slip stitch again. I'm going to do that in a moment. But that is pretty much the second scrunchie. So there we are, a little half-term treat for any little people that you might have. Make them a scrunchie. Squeeze some sewing pleasure in without getting told off for doing stuff for yourself. Yeah, you know, it gets you out of it. There we are, there's the second one. Not obviously sewing up the gap. Oh, love them. They are fab. Nice and easy. There you go. I want to see everybody wearing their scrunchies. Let me do a double scrunchie, my ponytail. Maybe I'll do a bun or something. There you are. Lots of fun. There we go. Look at that, ladies. They're fab. Fab. I love them. So have a go. Remember, if you have a go at your live sewing, share your makes in the group. If you've got any questions, pop them on this feed here. If you're watching on replay, say hello on replay. Let me know. Yeah, and show me what you make. Hope you have fun doing that. Super easy. It will take you just sort of 20 minutes or so once you get going. Just make sure you've got some elastic, most importantly, and make sure you put your elastic through before you sew it together. Top tip there. And make some fab scrunchies. Until then, I'm going to see you all again soon.